My name's Jackie Short. I'd like to welcome you to our 8th Holding Space webinar. We've got a large group here today. We've got 85 people registered, and we'll have a nice big contingent from India as well today. So welcome all our Indian friends who've got up especially early to be here. And most importantly, we have a very special guest who's joining us from North America, from New York, Jodi Mullen, and she's going to be presenting in just a moment. So welcome everybody today. I'd also like, before we start, to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you from today, the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and pay our collective respects to elders past, present and emerging. This is our 8th Holding Space webinar, and the focus today is working with children. After Jodi does her presentation today, we're going to have, like we've had in the past, little breakout rooms. So you'll be with one or two others and you can reflect on what she shared and how it might apply to the work that you're doing or the studies that you're doing. And then I'm going to do a presentation on managing the third quarter. So there's a Tasmanian psychologist who's supported a lot of teams in isolation in Antarctica. And she reflected with a journalist recently on what the third quarter means for people in isolation. So it's a really interesting journalistic piece that came out of an online journal that I read a week ago, and I wanted to share some of those reflections with you. Because even though we're not in Antarctica or in a space shuttle or in a submarine, some of those same principles of isolation apply to us, I think, at this time. So I'd like to share those with you. And then we're going to have, again, our giveaways and a competition at the end. So stay with us for the chance to win one of Jodi's on-demand webinars that she's done with us in the past, as well as another upcoming one that we have. So that's what we've got planned for today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jodi to you. She's been a mental health counsellor and play therapist for over 25 years now. She's a really dynamic speaker and presenter, and she has a real passion for working with children and supporting those people working with children. So I'd like to welcome, without further ado, Jodi, and great to have you here tonight. Well, today for us, but tonight for you. Welcome.
Tonight for me, yes. I'm delighted. Thank you so much for this invitation and opportunity, Jackie. And it's amazing to see all these faces. So that is super energizing. I'm excited.
Jodi, how long have you been in?
So I live in New York State. I don't live near New York City, though. I feel like that's always an important thing to clarify. So if I drove to New York City and there was absolutely no traffic, it would still take me 5 hours. So if that gives you some sense, I live in the central New York area. And the governor of New York, though, really responded to what was happening in New York City. And so we've been stay at home since mid-March. I think it was like the 13th or the 14th of March. So it's been a while. And it's very difficult to keep track of, and I know other people are experiencing this, keep track of the day and the date. And I had a teenager actually that I was doing a session with, and I needed to meet with him in person. He had some suicide ideation, and so it was early on, and it was maybe the last week of March, early on in our New York State pause policy. And I said to him, so listen, next time we'll meet, it will be April whatever, April 1st, April 3rd. And he said, it's March, just like that. And I thought, oh, you are so capturing what so many people are experiencing. So yeah, it was like early mid-March since we have been on pause, is what our governor calls it.
How do you think that's impacting you as a mental health professional?
Well,
how can I make it loud?
I would have told you something different if you asked me like before. I would have said, I would love this because I really energized from being by myself. I'm one of those people. I love being in my home so much. My entire home feels like a sanctuary to me, the outdoor space, the indoor space. But that has not been my experience at all. So I think one of the things I realize is I'm not home by myself. So there's that. So even if nobody's bothering me, and I don't mean that exactly the way it's coming out, but even if nobody's like in my space, or anything like that. I still, my partner's here. My 20-year-old daughter had to come home from college, which I can't even imagine what that would be like for those students who had to come home from college. And then I have a 16-year-old son. So we're all kind of quieter people, and we keep to ourselves quite a bit. But even so, just the other bodies didn't give me that, like, oh, I'm home by myself. I can talk to myself out loud and solve the all the things that are going on. Um, so that, I think that's been a huge surprise to me, that part especially.
Do you think there's unique opportunities in among these challenges?
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, professionally and personally. So I had just gone on a walk a little bit earlier today with one of my friends, and she had rode her bike over to our house with her son. Her son went in the pool, and then we went for a walk, and my older kids watched him. And then she said her and her son were discussing on the ride home. He's 9. They were discussing on the ride home, what are some of the silver linings of COVID? And he said, to her that he gets to spend more time with her, and he loves that. And then she said that she just wanted to communicate that one of the silver linings for her was that we get to spend more time together. So, I've been going on walks with my friends, masked and 6 feet apart, and that kind of thing. But I've been able to do more of it because my schedule has a little bit more flexibility, and some of them aren't working at all, or they're in the same boat that I am, where they're still working and working quite a bit, but there's a lot of flexibility. The other thing, my family at home, one of the things, we're all foodies. Like, we love to cook and eat, new things. My my son definitely has that 16-year-old boy, though, appetite where, it's like chicken, mozzarella sticks. Like, there's not much wiggling there. So he doesn't join us as much as or get into it as much as we do. But we've been playing like cook-off games. So where you get, really taking from like the Food Network a list of ingredients, and you have to make something out of it. So our family has been eating really, really unique and well, and that has been really fun because I think it's a place where we all our creativity is coming out, and that's exciting too because I think part of what otherwise like we're feeling is kind of like I see the same people every day. I sit in front of the same computer screen every day. And so to have even a change up in like, I've never had this style food, or I've never tried this before, has been fun for our family.
Fantastic. Do you see also creative opportunities in the work that you're doing at this time?
Well, I feel like you have to, right? So I primarily do child-centered play therapy when I am face-to-face counseling children, and that, I mean, there's like a handful of the kids I see who will still they'll play, and I will do I'll do my thing. But most of the children that I'm seeing, that's not the case. So I've really had to shift to how do I use the philosophy and approach guidelines and it not be what it looks like in the playroom because it just can't. So it has super forced and I think in a good way me to be creative around that and even with my adolescent, I see clients, I should say, womb to tomb, so and everything in between. So I think just being able to shift gears, make real good use of their appointment times. I think that has come about. And so bringing some more creativity, using actually what is in kind of wired into me as a play therapist, even more so with my teenagers and my adolescent and my adult clients than I had in the past. So that's been really lovely. And also another like caveat to that is so much I think just is emerging organically from what the kids are bringing and my clients, also adolescents and adults, but to a great extent what the children are bringing. I'm like, oh, we can do something with that. So I've always thought of the children that I work with as my teachers, and right now they're being same thing. There are teachers right now about how to do play therapy, telehealth during a pandemic.
Fantastic. Are there any particular things that children or adolescents have introduced that you think could be useful for others to know at this point?
Yeah. One thing I do think also is that there's a little bit of a like a shield that comes with doing telehealth. So a lot of the children that and adolescents that I'm seeing are telling me things that I don't necessarily know that they would have said otherwise. So that's interesting to me. But one of a game that I play with one little girl is she's 6. She is a severe trauma survivor, and she said, I just really miss you, and I just really miss the playroom. And so I, reflected her feelings and said, like, this is really hard. Like, you feel so connected. And she said, and you won't even look the same next time I see you because you'll be wearing a stupid mask. And I said, yeah. And I said, it's hard to tell what people are thinking and feeling when you can only see half their face. So we wound up playing this game where she went and got a mask and I put on a mask, and we had to guess each what the other one was thinking or feeling. And she was fantastic at it. So like just being able to see like my cheeks, my eyes, my eyebrows, my forehead, she was able to guess how I was feeling, and I was able to do that with her. And I thought that was good practice for when we return, to the playroom. So that was one that really just came from, something that she said. Another thing that I've done, actually using Zoom, is there's a whiteboard feature in Zoom. So I've been playing like some drawing games where like I draw a line and they draw a line back and forth on the whiteboard on Zoom. And that's engaging for even some of my younger adolescents. They've enjoyed that too. So those are, I think, the two that I was like, oh, like really surprised me. And then I've gone on to use with like other kids like that. I was like, thank you, teacher. Now I'm going to go use this with some of the other children that I work with.
Yeah, great example of how organically these things are developing different approaches and methods. Yeah, thanks. I know in my very first contact with you, Jodi, I was impressed with how honest you were, and I know in the webinar, which will be a giveaway today for somebody who wins our prize, you reflected again in that Play Therapy Essentials webinar about, I don't know, was it you not liking children or you thinking children didn't like you when you first started? And so you shared that very honestly with us, and how play therapy and play therapy training really completely turned that around for you. So I know you can be honest, and I wonder how much of your own self are you sharing with your clients at this time? Is that any more or less than normal?
It's probably more than normal, and one is that like they see it, right? So this is where the space that I use, and there are occasions where you'll see a figure walk. My door is glass in my office. A figure will walk by, and somebody, like, not usually the adults don't say anything, but like my teenagers will be like, "Who is that?" Or definitely the little kids, or the little kids, we have 4 cats, and so we play like, let's introduce each other to our 4-leggeds. It's not an opportunity that I would otherwise have. And then this one, I totally forgot about this. It was 2 weeks ago. A little girl that I work with who is 8. And she is feisty, spunky. She's definitely like my kind of kid. I love working with her in office. And we were actually near termination, and then this has really thrown her for a loop. She is like super extroverted. She's an only child in a single parent home. So she is like, at this point. So she was showing me, like taking me on a tour and showing me her like special play area in her home. And there were all these instruments. So she said to me, do you have any musical instruments? And I felt like, I'm going to lie because, because I know what's coming next is she's going to ask me to play a musical instrument. I don't play any musical instruments. My daughter's a musician, so we have a house full of instruments, but I don't play any, and I definitely don't sing. So so I said, I was honest, and I said, I actually have a lot of instruments. And she said, do you have any in your room? And I didn't. And she said, well, could you bring some in there? And I said, okay, I think I could bring the bongo drums and the guitar in here. And so then she's like, let's play music back and forth. Like, again, like she knows how to do music therapy. Let's play music back and forth like we're having a conversation, and then we can write a song together. Okay. So that's what we did, and it was a blast. And now I've decided to, without, and when I say no musical ability, I'm not exaggerating here. So I left my bongo drums. They're actually right there in my office, and the guitar. And so I just thought it was this really cool opportunity to, you asked, am I being more honest? I'm also being, yes, I'm being more, maybe more honest, but I'm also being more vulnerable. It's like they're in my house, in is part of what I'm thinking. But the other is that I think that this is a really good opportunity for all of us to take down some of the masks that we wear a little bit, because we really are all in this together. So to model vulnerability, and to model that for even the youngest of my clients, I think is important.
I know you've mentioned that you've got two young adults living with you. Was it a 14 and a 20-year-old?
16 and 20.
Sorry,
Yes.
16 and 20.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you? Because I know a lot of people are in this situation, and in Australia we've had a lot of health practitioners who are also homeschooling and
Right.
expected also to work, and having that juggle. And as you say, it's great to be at home, but you're actually sharing that space all the time now with your family. How do you
Right.
manage? And if you've got any tips for survival for others?
I think respecting each other's like space and what it looks like is important. So, I mean, there was a time where, so my husband's also a mental health counselor, like I am. So you can imagine our kids are completely messed up. But so is my husband and I both doing telehealth counseling. My husband and I also both are professors at the local university. Both of us teaching our classes online, and then my daughter, who's now home from college, taking her courses online, and she's musician, so a lot of those courses involve her, and she's a vocalist, singing, playing the piano. It was just and I think because my son's a little bit of a separate issue, but I think because it really has always been very important to me since taking play therapy back in 1992, is that to really show respect to children. So my kids grew up with that, and it was so cool to, my daughter would say, like, I need to practice for my piano exam, but I heard you in your office, so on with somebody, so I didn't want that to play in the background. And so we were just negotiating, like, okay, well, I have a break from this time to this time, so if you want to play piano, go, practice piano, you can go ahead and do that. And that we all created our own space too was very important. So, and like I would put like a little sign outside my door that said, like I'm recording something, or even I have one now, that says I'm doing a webinar, shh, that kind of thing. And then with my son, he's in high school. He is a sophomore in high school, and I did not stress about like my role as in schooling him, and I think that because in fairness, I did a little bit in the beginning, like you have to have this done, you have to, like getting very wound up about that. But then I kind of let it go. One, because I'm an educator, but I teach graduate school. So I wouldn't even want to deal with undergraduates, to be honest. Like that's really hard for me. I like my graduate students, and I would be terrible at teaching. I don't know that I could help him. I honestly don't. So we had a conversation with him about, we trust you to be moving along at the pace you're supposed to be moving along, asking for help when you need it. And if you can do that, then you can play on your video games, which is what he was doing quite a bit of. You can be on your video games as much as you need to, because for him, that's how he connects to his friends. Like, it's not just like he's playing a video game, they're all playing the game together, like simultaneously. So even though it's something that's very foreign to me, really just like honoring where he's at. And there's one point where I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and I could hear him on the computer, and I was livid. I was like hardcore mom mode, like mad. And I knew I would be able to fall back to sleep because I'm so mad. So I go down to talk to him, and I said, dude, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. This is really bad for your system. You're going to throw off your circadian rhythm. And I'm, doing that whole thing. And he says, Mom, I'm 16 years old and I'm on playing video games with my friends at 4 o'clock in the morning. I could really be doing a lot worse, couldn't I? And I went, yep, I'm out. Good night. And I just was like, I'm gonna let that be. Is that what I would like for him right now? No, but as a parent, I pick my battles, and I didn't think that he makes really good decisions, and that didn't seem like a battle that would be worthwhile. So
Thanks for sharing that. It's
welcome.
And are you preparing to go back, or are you still kind of at home? Where are you? Because I know every city, every state, every country is at a different sort of spot, but the reality is the virus is still there. So
Yes, yeah. So I think again that even though we've only had 22 cases in our county, is that we're following the guidelines of the entire state. So where are we in terms of going back? Is I So our healthcare system in the United States, that's a whole other thing, is we were not able to do telehealth prior to COVID, right? So all the rules kind of changed that said insurance companies have to pay for telehealth sessions even though they hadn't prior. So our thought and collective in the staff that I have is that we're going to keep doing this as long as we can, because we feel very productive. We feel our clients are really benefiting, except when they're not. And then if they're not, then we will make exceptions. So for instance, I have a young adult client who is really, really, really struggling. Has post-traumatic stress disorder, has had a traumatic brain injury, is a polysubstance user, actively, suicidal. So the other day she's like, I need to get out of my house. And I said, all right, here's the deal, because I think she does need to get out of her house. I do think that would be really good for her, and she lives like an hour and a half away to where I work. So she said, so I said, what if had you come into the office? Here's the situation. We're both going to wear masks. We're going to sit at least 6 feet apart. The whole place has been sanitized. Then you get 3 hours in the car just by yourself. And she was like, I already feel better knowing that I can do that. And I thought, like, I feel good about that. But one of the things I was saying to my staff, because I have a staff of like 25 counselors, and is I was saying to them, if you guys aren't feeling comfortable coming back, you're not going to be listening. You can't give away what you don't have, right? So I want my staff to come back feeling safe. I want my staff to come back feeling assured. And I don't know, for some of them, I think that's going to take a vaccine. So even though I'm a huge planner and I like things like down to the minute, I think that's another silver lining, is like, nope, all you've got is the present. You can't you can't really mess with the future here. So making those kind of adjustments in the way I think about things, but also giving space to the other people in my life around that.
that's such a powerful reflection, Jodi, that you can't give away that which you don't have. And to try and provide safety for ourselves as well as for those that we're working with is just really so important. Is there anything that works for you in feeling more safe or feeling more calm or more cared for in this? Have you got any particular practices that have been helpful for you?
I need to go outside. And so the where the part of New York that I live in has the bizarrest weather, and so we get like a lot of snow. Sometimes we even make like the global news about how much snow we get, and our winters are very, very long. So I was just telling you, I was telling you, Jackie, a few minutes ago, is that it's 2 weeks ago in the month of May it snowed here, and then today I was in my swimming pool. And so it's completely crazy. But when the weather in the beginning, the first I would say 4 to 6 weeks, the weather was really, really awful here. And it wasn't outside weather, even for people who love being outside. It was dark, it was snowy and wet, it was just windy. So definitely, once the weather changed here and it started to feel more spring summery, that has made a big difference. And I think just also seeing like everything in bloom that has been really helpful. The other thing I started to do was just find quiet time that I could make feel like alone time. So journaling has been one of like the things that has been super helpful to me during the last 2 or 3 months.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing all of those reflections personally and professionally. Would you be open to a couple of questions if people had any at this point?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right. How would you best like to manage that? Do you want me or Ada to read those, or would you like to read them?
No, I would like you or Aiden to do it.
Okay, I'm happy to read those out for you. So we've got some coming through at the moment and some lovely feedback on things that you've said already. So if you do have any non-client related questions for Jodi that she could answer in a minute, so not how do you do, what is play therapy? That's probably a really big one, but any really specific ones that she can answer, feel free to put them in the chat box. She's going to stay with us for another 5 minutes to answer those. This is a question, Jodi, from Trina. I'm a child-centered play therapist working from home at the moment with children and doing filial therapy with parents. We are transitioning from telephone mode to telehealth. What do you think child-centered play therapy is going to look like post-pandemic?
That's such a good question. I actually am working on a webinar about that because I don't think we know. So it's a guess, right? So my guess is going to be is that that if we're going to be doing it face to face, that it is going to involve mask wearing, and that I really do think that little girl was onto something that I talked about, that there should be some prep in that, because in terms of we as adults are missing half the information, right? If the little ones' faces are covered, but it's also a little bit more difficult to hear what people are saying and for them to hear you. And then I think how much children rely on facial expressions for them to understand, for them to learn, it's so, so important. So I think that prepping kids like that is something that I'm going to definitely do before I return to the playroom. I also think just like that we're going to see some of them really show us, like they show us their lives. That's how child-centered play therapy works. So I think we're going to see, have them work out what has happened, during the pandemic. One of my supervisees was telling me a little one that she sees was playing, really doing like the traditional play therapy stuff while she was reflecting and tracking and limit setting and all that good stuff. And the little girl just says, I hate COVID. Now I'm going to beat it up, and started beating on a pillow that she had. And I thought, oh, that's really great because she's getting to put voice to that. But I think we're going to see quite a bit of that in the playroom. I also am super concerned with like separation anxiety just going through the roof because I'm thinking of some of my friends and colleagues who have little ones at home, and even what this story I shared about my friend and her son biking together is that appreciating all this time, wanting to see your friends and teachers and have the routine of school back, for instance, but all this time with parents, I think it's going to make it hard for parents and children, and I think that's going to show up in filial therapy. I think it's going to show up in play therapy as well. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Jodi. Question from Kelly: how do you engage a 2-year-old on Zoom?
Not easily. So what a challenge. So what I've been recommending to people about the youngest, like so 2, 3, 4-year-olds, is doing things that you might do with that are developmentally sensitive with like that you've done with your own kids if you have children. Like I've been reading books to children that age, or doing silly faces or silly dances, things like that. That playing music, some of those things that are just like, well, if I was just hanging out with this kid, not necessarily doing play therapy, this is what I would probably do. And part of that, I think that what many people are struggling with now is thinking like, if I'm just reading a book to this kid, how is that like therapy? And I'm just watching so many of the children that I work with really value their time and doing this. So I think that part of therapy is right, just creating that safe environment where they can feel self. And I think that that is what's happening even if you are reading a story or doing silly dances, those kind of things. I have a one little boy. I know I tell a lot of I tell a lot of stories, period. But I have one little boy who's 6, and his parents have set it up so he can call me to do FaceTime on the family's iPad. He every single time he calls 10 minutes or 15 minutes beforehand, and I say like, I'll call you back when it's our time to start. And he'll be like, but I want to start now. And so I think if that's how he feels, like he's just demonstrating that this is working, that this is important. And I definitely, want to convey that, is that because I think especially those of you doing play therapy, there's so many times we are asking ourselves when we're doing face-to-face work, so it's really therapy, when we're in the playroom with kids. I think it's even more exaggerated now. And I think the other part that can make it more exaggerated now is if with parents or caregivers in the room or nearby, then I think you become a little bit more self-conscious about what you're doing under the auspice of counseling or therapy.
That's really true. A question here from Anne, and I'm skipping through and I'll come back to some of them. Do you have a family strengthening client activity for this time?
Family strengthening activity. Well, I have talked to some of the parents of the children that I work with, or the teenagers that I work with, about, well, actually, even some of my adult clients who are parents, about the cooking thing, and just that we did in our own family, and about like how can you create a new ritual? How can you create something that builds some routine and some stability, but it also is new and is saying like this was a really special time. It was a weird time, but that when your children look back, they can go and every week we made Sundays on Sunday, or we did this thing where we danced out in the rain whenever it rained. Anything like that. I think it really has to speak to that particular family, like what makes that family feel joy and alive, and what are the things that they're interested in. So I think it would be really family specific, and everyone has to buy in. That's the other thing, and I think sometimes that's the trickiest part in working with families, is getting everyone to buy in, especially if they're at different ages and have different interests. I think that certainly is a challenge. And so for me, it's I don't generally ask a lot of questions at all in my role as a therapist, but that's where I will ask a lot of questions. And then sometimes it works for me to just sit with it a little bit and let my creativity, let's see what emerges from my own creativity. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. What's your take on mindfulness? This is a big question, maybe.
Well, yeah, my take on it right now is like that we can't not do it, almost, is that we really have to, because we have no idea, like even tomorrow, to an extent. Oh, I mean, obviously, but we can't have the illusion that we know what tomorrow is going to be like anymore. That has been taken from us. So I think building in mindfulness kind of fits really nicely with where we're, just where we're at globally right now. So if I have opportunity to do it with my clients and at home, and people are into it, then I'll go there. But I feel like sometimes even just calling it mindfulness makes people disinterested. So we'll just talk about, like, let's just focus on what's happening right now. So if you do it that way, I think that sometimes that gives you an in where other people might be like, that mindfulness is taken on more like a cliche kind of role.
Fantastic. And our last question from Georgia May: how do you manage social distancing with small children who perhaps don't really understand that they can't give you a hug or rush at you or play with you in a more interactive way that they might normally be doing?
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge. Is obviously another challenge that comes up is like that doesn't make sense. One of the things that when I'm teaching play therapy, and is that I always teach about like the culture of childhood, and that in the culture of childhood, personal space is zero. So where in like dominant United States culture, it's 18 inches is our personal space. That's our space bubble here in the US. And that's really different in different cultures, right? But if you think of childhood as a culture, there's like zero, like there's no space. So I think I would the way that I would part of the way that I would handle it professionally is similarly to how I handle kids with precarious boundaries, many of who have been sexually traumatized. That's a child who will run up to you the first time you meet them, and they will like jump on you. And I think if you work with children for a little bit of time, especially as a play therapist, you get these like Jedi-like reflexes. And so for me, it's I will put my hand up like right between me and the child before they get to me and say, like, we don't know each other very well yet. We're just gonna shake hands, or or bow, or we make up something. But I think even more complicated now, because I don't know that we should be shaking hands, or I don't know that we should be that close. So I think there's there's some good videos that they've put out, like Sesame Street here in the US has put out some good videos for kids, and the Association for Play Therapy, I think, put out one for kids. There's a bunch of different ones, but I think it's the repetition and the modeling of that, because if they don't see that happening, they're not going to do it. So I think it's like repetition, 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 but also see mommy's, going on a walk with her friend, but we both have masks on, and see she's standing all the way on the other side of the street, or, looking for those opportunities to be able to really point out, those things to children when they're happening. But it is going to be really difficult, especially I would say, that certainly that 4 to 8-year-old range, it's going to be difficult there. But with the ones younger than that, I don't know that they can make sense of that. So I think that that's just being like, being able to help parents set those limits and boundaries about safety.
Fabulous. Jodi, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your practical insights with us. It's always so lovely to see you. I'd like to give you an elbow kind of touch as a farewell. That might be the best that we can do today in terms of our connection. But if you do have any feedback for Jodi that you want to pop in the chat box, I'm sure she'd love to read that, and I can send it to you later, Jodi, as well. So we are going to move on with a couple of other exercises, and Jodi, you're welcome to stay, but we might say a very, very appreciative farewell, and thank you for being here with us. You really shared so much generously, and I can see lots of people waving and saying farewell. If you want to make it, those of you with cameras on, I know most of you do, if you want to, Jodi can see all of you. So if you want to wave goodbye or give her a gesture of appreciation, I'm sure she'll love that when she goes off and enjoys the rest of her evening. So thank you again, Jodi. It's really always great to have you on board, and all the best with your garden and your swimming and everything, all the good stuff that you've got coming up too. So.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
A further presentation on and some thoughts about this idea of the third quarter. Just by way of a show of hands, has anyone heard about this or read about what this might be?
No.
It might be a little bit new. So what it is, it's an article that I read last week in Triple J's Hack, and it was written by a fellow called James Purtill. And what he was reflecting on is that there are studies of people who have been isolated, like many of us still are in different ways, but for work, so in submarines, in space stations, or in Antarctica. And what these studies have found is that there's an inflection point. There's a point at which things get much worse in terms of interpersonal relationships. And this has actually been documented. According to a ClinPsych who assesses mental health of Australians living in Antarctica for a particular season, she argues that we're entering this third phase now. So Kimberly Norris, who is an authority on confinement and reintegration at the University of Tasmania, has argued that Australians have broadly been through two periods of isolation. So the first was the initial kind of panic buying and confusion, like what are we doing, and we just have to prepare and it's all really scary and uncertain. And then there's a bit of a honeymoon period for many. So it sort of goes into a bit of a lull. It feels novel. There might be some difference about staying at home. And for many people, it was actually a positive thing. There were benefits that we could all experience from working from home, like being in our slippers or pajamas all day and not having traffic worries. But those initial phases have definitely passed. We're definitely all beyond that, wherever we are in the world now. So she argues we may be entering this dreaded third quarter where time grows really sludgy, so we're not quite sure what day it is, what time it is, weekends blur into weekdays, and as this cosmonaut reflected, we don't understand what's going on with us. It feels really, really strange. We feel like we're in this kind of suspended limbo. The third quarter phenomenon was first described in the early 80s in studies that were done to determine how long humans could survive in space. And even though radiation and zero gravity were big problems for one's physical health, they found that more of a problem was the interpersonal conflict that emerged because of the isolation that the astronauts were experiencing. So typically mood and morale reach their lowest point somewhere between a half and 2/3 mark of a space mission. And this third stage depends on the relative passage of time. So it's not necessarily it's going to happen in 3 weeks or 3 months. So for instance, in a 6-month mission, it could happen at around 4 months, while in a 1-year posting, it might appear at the 8-month point. So it's about a third of the way into whatever the isolation is. And the challenge is for us is that we actually don't really know, unlike a space mission or an Antarctic stage, how long this social isolating or this being at home might be. In Australia, what we're seeing is definitely a great curve flattening. So we might be thinking that we've actually done it, and we can be hopeful that we're getting out, and the fact that schools are resuming and some of the distancing has lessened a little bit and some of the pubs and clubs are opening up, we might be feeling a bit more hopeful. And our daily cases are only in the single digits. So we might feel like we're past halfway, but both infectious diseases experts and politicians who are responsible for setting the restrictions in place would argue that we're not really close. Because modelling shows that if we allow complete freedom again, we're likely to have a second wave. So the uncertainty of the duration of restrictions could stretch this third quarter over many months and increases our sense of anticipation. We know that isolation affects us in different ways and in profound ways. And it's great to remember that even fearless astronauts and polar explorers get knocked sideways simply by not having enough people around, or the people that might normally be used to and have useful for them. Norris argues that we should take it easy on ourselves because the next few months might actually be quite challenging. But there's some good news that can also come out of this. Despite the third quarter phenomenon, many people who do experience it find that even when they're out of it, they even might want to do it again. Half of those who do overwinter in Antarctica want to go back, and nearly 100% of astronauts want to go back up. So Norris has asked them, if it's so bad, why would you want to do it again? And they argue that they value the experience for what it's given them. They've found that silver lining, and they wouldn't mind another experience of that. And one of the things that really is important to people and that they learn from it is what their personal values are and how they can be better committed to living them. And so my question for you now, thinking about this third quarter and what it might be bringing up for us, and there's challenges as well as opportunities, in terms of the values that have really come to the fore for you, what personal values are more important to you than ever? And if I could get you to type some of those into the chat box, it would be nice if you could read through those and share those among yourselves too.